Racist cop blocks black woman unaware her classified badge reveals. She supervises every judge on that floor. Hello, everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now let's return to our main character. Monica Hale stood just beyond the security checkpoint on the 4th floor of the federal courthouse, a place where the air always felt cooler than the rest of the building and every sound seemed to echo longer than it should. The polished marble beneath her shoes reflected the overhead lights in soft, cold lines, and the distant murmur of clerks, attorneys, and judges blended into a low, constant hum. Monica did not rush. She never did. Her posture was calm, her shoulders relaxed, her hands resting naturally at her sides, as if she were simply another professional moving through another government hallway on another ordinary morning. But nothing about this morning was ordinary. A uniformed officer stepped into her path without warning, his boots stopping inches from her toes. Officer Daniel Cross had been stationed on this floor for years, long enough to believe he knew who belonged and who did not. He glanced at Monica once, then twice, his expression tightening in a way that suggested a decision had already been made. He lifted a hand, palm out, a silent command to stop. Monica halted without protest, her gaze steady, her face unreadable. Around them, people slowed their steps, sensing tension the way one senses a sudden drop in temperature. Officer Cross asked where she thought she was going, his tone clipped, formal, and edged with something sharper beneath the surface. Monica answered evenly, giving no more and no less than was required. She did not raise her voice. She did not offer explanations. She simply stated that she had business on this floor. That answer seemed to irritate him. He glanced at her identification briefly, then handed it back with a dismissive flick, telling her that access to this level was restricted and that she would need proper authorization. Monica listened without interruption. The badge clipped discreetly inside her jacket remained hidden, its matte finish catching no light, its significance known to almost no one in the building. A court clerk nearby paused, eyes narrowing slightly, as if something about the exchange felt off. Another officer shifted his weight, but said nothing. Monica felt the familiar stillness settle inside her, the quiet patience that came from years of walking into rooms where assumptions were made before words were spoken. She had learned long ago that silence could be more revealing than any argument. Officer Cross continued, his voice growing louder, more confident, filling the hallway with authority he believed was absolute. He spoke about procedures, about rules, about how order was maintained in places like this. Monica let him finish. She met his eyes only once, briefly, not with challenge, not with fear, but with a calm certainty that did not belong to someone being stopped in a hallway. To anyone watching, she appeared to be just another woman delayed by bureaucracy, another momentary inconvenience in a system built on control and routine. But beneath her composed exterior was the knowledge that every second of this interaction was being noted, not by cameras or witnesses, but by the quiet mechanisms of accountability that rarely announced themselves until it was too late to look away. Monica adjusted her jacket slightly, the fabric shifting just enough to hint at something concealed beneath, and waited. She had not come here to argue. She had not come here to explain herself. She had come to observe, to measure, and to let the truth surface in its own time. And as Officer Cross stood blocking her path, unaware of how thin the ground beneath his confidence truly was, the courthouse continued to move around them, oblivious to the fact that power, real power, was standing perfectly still. The hallway did not erupt into chaos or raise voices after Monica Hale was stopped. Instead, it settled into something heavier, a quiet tension that stretched as seconds passed, and no one moved to break it. People continued walking, but more slowly now, their footsteps measured, their attention divided between their destinations and the still scene unfolding near the security desk. Officer Daniel Cross shifted his stance, adjusting his belt as if grounding himself in the familiar weight of authority. He repeated that this floor was reserved for judges, senior court officials, and authorized personnel only, his voice carrying just far enough to ensure others heard him. Monica remained exactly where she was, her breathing steady, her expression unchanged. She did not argue the point. She did not ask for a supervisor. She simply listened, as if she were cataloging every word for later review. A nearby courtroom door opened briefly, releasing a judge and two clerks into the corridor. Their conversation faltered when they noticed the standoff. One of the clerks glanced at Monica, then at Officer Cross, and hesitated before lowering his eyes and continuing on. The judge followed, offering a brief nod to the officer without acknowledging the woman being blocked. That small gesture did not go unnoticed. Monica's gaze followed them for only a moment before returning to the officer in front of her. Cross seemed encouraged by the silent endorsement. He explained, slowly and deliberately, that rules existed for a reason and that exceptions could not be made simply because someone claimed to have important business. He spoke as though he were delivering a lesson, his tone firm but controlled, confident that the structure of the building itself was on his side. Monica responded with a single sentence, calm and precise, stating that she was fully aware of the rules and that her presence on this floor complied with them. That answer gave him pause. He studied her more closely now, as if looking for something he had missed. Her clothing was professional but understated, her manner composed, her confidence quiet rather than performative. It did not match the picture he had already formed in his mind, and that disconnect unsettled him. He asked again for clarification, this time with a sharper edge, requesting documentation that clearly authorized her access. Monica reached slowly toward her jacket, then stopped, not because she was uncertain, but because she understood timing. She met his eyes and said she would comply when asked properly and without assumptions. The air between them seemed to tighten. A court reporter standing by the wall shifted uncomfortably, pretending to review notes that did not exist. Another officer down the corridor watched closely but made no move to intervene. Monica could feel the weight of the moment pressing in, not as fear but as recognition. This was the space where systems revealed their true shape, not in grand trials or televised hearings, but in quiet hallways where power decided who was seen and who was dismissed. Officer Cross cleared his throat and took a half-step closer, careful not to cross into anything that could be questioned later. He told her again that she would need to step aside until her status could be verified. Monica nodded once, acknowledging the statement without accepting its premise. She adjusted her jacket again, the fabric shifting, the concealed badge resting against her side like a held breath. She did not reveal it yet. She knew that once it came into view, nothing would be the same. Around them, the courthouse continued its rhythm. Phones ringing in distant offices, elevators chiming softly, the machinery of justice moving forward, unaware that one small interaction was already beginning to expose the fault lines beneath its polished surface. Monica Hale remained in place as the moment stretched, aware that the hallway itself seemed to be holding its breath. She had learned over the years that authority often relied on momentum, on people moving past uncomfortable moments before questions could form. By standing still, she disrupted that rhythm. Officer Daniel Cross checked his watch, then glanced toward the security desk as if expecting reinforcement that did not come. His confidence wavered just enough to reveal impatience beneath it. He asked her name again, this time writing it down with deliberate care, as though the act itself asserted control. Monica gave it without hesitation. She watched his expression shift when he repeated it quietly to himself, testing how it sounded in his mouth. Somewhere behind them, an elevator chimed and released a group of attorneys who slowed as they passed, curiosity flickering across their faces before professional caution pulled their eyes away. Monica felt no urge to fill the silence. She had filled enough rooms with explanations in her life to know when they were unnecessary. Cross informed her that verification could take several minutes, and suggested she wait off to the side. The word suggested carried an implication he did not acknowledge. Monica nodded once, stepped exactly where he indicated, and stopped again, neither retreating nor advancing. That small compliance seemed to satisfy him, at least temporarily. He made a call, his voice low, using coded language meant to sound procedural rather than personal. Monica listened as he described her presence without describing her at all, reducing her to an obstacle that needed to be categorized. As he spoke, she noticed a senior judge farther down the corridor pause mid-conversation, his gaze lingering on the scene longer than courtesy required. Recognition flickered there, brief but unmistakable, before he turned away, his shoulders stiff. Monica filed that reaction away. It confirmed what she already suspected. Cross ended the call and returned his attention to her, explaining that until clearance was confirmed, she would need to remain where she was. His tone had softened slightly, less commanding, more cautious. Monica thanked him, the words sincere but measured, and folded her hands loosely in front of her. She appeared patient, but inside she was acutely aware of how these moments accumulated, how small delays became patterns, and how patterns became normalized barriers. She had spent years studying those patterns from behind closed doors, reviewing reports, transcripts, and complaints that rarely made headlines. Now she was standing inside one. The courthouse continued to function around them, but the space between Monica and the officer felt isolated, as though an invisible line had been drawn. Cross glanced again at her jacket, at the subtle weight beneath it that his instincts told him mattered, though he could not say why. He considered asking her to remove it, then thought better of it, uncertain how such a request would be received. That hesitation marked a shift. For the first time, he was no longer fully certain of his position. Monica noticed the change immediately. She met his eyes again, not confrontational, not submissive, simply present. In that look was the quiet assurance of someone who understood the structure of power not as a performance, but as a responsibility. She did not need to announce who she was. She did not need to demand passage. She knew that once the truth emerged, it would do so completely, leaving no room for reinterpretation. Until then, she would stand, observe, and allow the system to reveal itself exactly as it was. The delay began to draw quiet attention from corners of the floor that usually stayed detached from hallway interruptions. A junior clerk paused near a filing cabinet, pretending to organize folders while watching the scene through the reflection in the glass. A bailiff at the far end of the corridor slowed his pace, his eyes moving between Monica Hale and Officer Daniel Cross with growing uncertainty. Cross felt it too. The subtle shift in the atmosphere when a situation refused to resolve itself quickly. He straightened his posture and reminded himself that order depended on decisiveness. He told Monica that remaining in the restricted area without confirmed clearance could cause unnecessary complications for court operations. His words were careful, chosen to sound administrative rather than personal, but the implication was clear. Monica acknowledged him with a calm nod. She did not apologize. She did not explain. She simply stated that she understood the importance of efficient court operations and that she had no intention of disrupting them. Her tone was steady, almost reassuring, and for a brief moment it unsettled him more than resistance would have. Cross glanced again toward the security desk, then toward the closed doors of a courtroom where a high-profile hearing was scheduled to begin within minutes. He was aware that judges disliked delays and that any disruption on this floor could reflect poorly on those assigned to maintain order. That pressure hardened his resolve. He asked Monica once more to confirm her purpose, this time in front of those lingering nearby, his voice slightly louder, as if seeking validation through witnesses. Monica answered with the same measured clarity, stating that her presence related directly to judicial oversight and compliance. The word oversight hung in the air longer than the rest. A court administrator standing near the elevator stiffened, his expression flickering with something close to alarm before he masked it behind a neutral smile. He checked his phone, then slipped it back into his pocket without saying a word. Monica noticed. Cross did not. He focused instead on the perceived challenge to his authority, reminding her that claims required verification and that credentials mattered in a building like this. Monica agreed. Credentials did matter. She said it plainly, without emphasis, without irony. The response felt like agreement, but something in her delivery made it sound final, as though the conversation had already moved past his objections. Cross felt a tightening in his chest, a sensation he dismissed as irritation. He had followed protocol. He had asked the questions. If anyone challenged him later, he could justify every step. Still, the longer Monica stood there, composed and unflinching, the more exposed he felt, as if the certainty he relied on was slowly eroding. A senior clerk approached cautiously, stopping just short of joining the exchange. He asked if everything was all right, his tone polite but strained. Cross assured him that it was, that verification was underway. The clerk nodded, but his eyes lingered on Monica with unmistakable recognition before he turned away. That look confirmed what Monica already knew. She was no longer invisible. The system was beginning to sense her presence, even if it had not yet acknowledged it openly. Cross cleared his throat and told Monica that once confirmation was received, she could proceed. Until then, she would need to wait. Monica thanked him again, the words calm and unprovocative, and resumed her quiet stillness. She felt no urgency. She had not come to rush the process. She had come to witness it. Around them, the courthouse hummed with restrained energy, unaware that the balance of control on that floor was already shifting, not through force or confrontation, but through patience, observation, and the quiet inevitability of truth waiting just beneath the surface. Time continued to pass, measured not by clocks, but by the subtle changes in the hallway around Monica Hale. The initial curiosity of passers-by had shifted into something more cautious, more restrained. Conversations lowered as people moved through the corridor, and glances lingered longer than professionalism usually allowed. Monica sensed the building adjusting to her presence, even if no one openly acknowledged it. She shifted her weight slightly, the motion minimal, but enough to reveal a faint metallic edge beneath her jacket before the fabric settled again. The movement was accidental only in appearance. Officer Daniel Cross noticed it this time. His eyes narrowed briefly, his attention drawn to the place where her jacket fell unnaturally flat, as if concealing something rigid and deliberate. He said nothing, but his posture changed, his earlier certainty giving way to calculation. He stepped aside for a moment to answer another call, his voice low, his words clipped. Monica caught fragments of the exchange, references to internal directories and authorization chains that rarely came into play. As he spoke, a court administrator emerged from a nearby office, his expression tight, his gaze darting first to Monica, and then away again, as if eye contact alone carried risk. He whispered something to a colleague, who immediately checked her phone before disappearing back into an office. These were small reactions, barely noticeable to anyone not trained to see them, but Monica recognized them instantly. They were signs of a system quietly alerting itself. Cross ended the call and returned, slower now, his voice carefully neutral as he informed Monica that verification was taking longer than expected. He suggested that she might be more comfortable waiting elsewhere. The suggestion carried a subtle urgency that had not been there before. Monica declined politely, explaining that remaining where she was would be sufficient. Her calm refusal seemed to unsettle him. He nodded, accepting the answer without comment, but his eyes betrayed a growing unease. A judge's assistant passed by briskly, then stopped abruptly as recognition flickered across her face. She hesitated, offered Monica a brief, respectful nod, and continued on without a word. Cross noticed that too. His jaw tightened. He began to understand that this situation was no longer contained within his authority alone. Monica remained composed, her thoughts focused not on the officer, but on the broader pattern unfolding. She had reviewed countless reports describing moments just like this, moments where bias, habit, and unchecked power intersected in quiet corridors far from public scrutiny. Today, she was no longer reviewing the record. She was inside it. Cross cleared his throat and asked, more carefully now, whether there was someone he could contact on her behalf to expedite the process. The question was framed as assistance, but the shift in tone was unmistakable. Monica considered him for a moment, then replied that the appropriate parties were already aware of her presence. The statement was true, though not in the way he assumed. A faint ripple of tension moved through the nearby staff, who overheard it. Phones were checked again. Doors opened and closed more quickly. The building was reacting, its internal awareness sharpening by the second. Cross glanced down the hallway, then back at Monica, his earlier confidence replaced by guarded professionalism. He had followed procedure, yet the ground beneath that procedure felt increasingly unstable. Monica adjusted her jacket once more, not to reveal what lay beneath, but to settle it, as though reminding herself that the moment of disclosure had not yet arrived. She did not rush it. She knew that once the truth emerged, it would reshape everything that had led up to it. Until then, she stood quietly, allowing the courthouse to reveal its instincts, its reflexes, and its unspoken hierarchies. In that silence, the most important details were already being planted, not through words or confrontation, but through the unmistakable reactions of a system beginning to recognize the authority it had nearly dismissed. As the waiting stretched on, Monica Hale allowed her attention to drift inward, not away from the present moment, but deeper into it, the way she had been trained to do when observing systems under quiet stress. She had walked into buildings like this countless times, though rarely through the same door. Most days, her work unfolded behind closed conference room walls, in carefully controlled briefings where titles mattered more than faces and authority was acknowledged before questions were asked. Today was different by design. She was here to see what happened before recognition arrived, before names were checked against lists and respect was recalibrated. Officer Daniel Cross remained nearby, no longer filling the space with instructions or explanations. His silence spoke more loudly than his earlier certainty. He glanced down the hallway again, then at his radio, then back at Monica, as if searching for an external signal that would tell him how to proceed. The absence of that signal unsettled him. Monica could sense his internal calculation, the mental review of protocol, the subtle fear of misstep that surfaced when authority encountered uncertainty. She remembered reading case summaries where moments like this were dismissed as misunderstandings, where intent was debated and outcomes minimized. Standing here now, she understood how easily those narratives formed. A misunderstanding required movement, resolution, and forgetting. She was offering none of those. A door down the hall opened, and a senior judge stepped out, pausing when he saw Monica. His expression tightened, not with anger, but with recognition edged by concern. He approached slowly, his measured pace suggesting deliberation rather than curiosity. Before he could speak, Cross straightened and addressed him, offering a brief explanation that emphasized procedure and caution. The judge listened, his eyes never leaving Monica's face. When Cross finished, the judge nodded once, said nothing, and turned away, retreating back through the door he had exited. The silence that followed was heavier than before. Cross shifted his weight, unsettled by the exchange. Monica felt no satisfaction, no triumph. This was not a moment of victory. It was a moment of clarity. She understood that the system was beginning to recognize itself in the mirror she held up simply by standing still. Cross cleared his throat and asked, carefully, whether she would prefer to sit while they waited. The question was framed politely, almost deferential. Monica declined with the same calm courtesy she had shown all along. She explained that standing was fine. Her voice carried no edge, no judgment, only assurance. That assurance unnerved him more than confrontation ever could. Nearby staff members pretended to focus on their tasks, but their movements had become clipped, their glances frequent. The building was aware now, aware that something was unfolding outside its usual script. Monica's thoughts returned briefly to the purpose that had brought her here, to the reviews and assessments scheduled for this floor, to the quiet accountability that followed every official who believed themselves beyond observation. None of that required her to announce who she was yet. In fact, announcing it too soon would have defeated the point. Cross received another message on his radio, this one brief, indecipherable to anyone else. He listened closely, nodded, and looked up at Monica with a new expression, one that blended professionalism with something close to restraint. He informed her that confirmation would be arriving shortly. The word confirmation carried weight now. Monica acknowledged him with a slight nod. She could feel the moment approaching, not with anticipation, but with inevitability. The truth did not need urgency. It only needed space. As the courthouse continued its measured rhythm around them, Monica remained exactly where she was, calm and observant, allowing the system to reach the conclusion it had been circling since the moment she stepped onto that floor. The shift happened quietly, without announcement, the way important things often do inside institutions that prefer to preserve appearances. A senior court official emerged from an office near the elevators, his pace measured but purposeful, eyes fixed on Monica Hale from the moment he stepped into the corridor. Officer Daniel Cross noticed him immediately and straightened, instinctively deferring to the presence of rank even before understanding its relevance. The official stopped a few feet away, glanced at Cross, then back to Monica, and his expression changed in a way that could not be mistaken for confusion. It was recognition, followed closely by restraint. He addressed Monica by name, his voice low but respectful, asking if everything was proceeding as expected. The hallway seemed to freeze. Cross turned toward Monica sharply, the sound of her name landing heavier than any raised voice. For the first time since the encounter began, he looked at her not as an obstacle, but as an unknown variable with sudden gravity. Monica met the official's gaze and replied that there had been a minor delay, nothing more. Her tone was even, professional, devoid of accusation. The official nodded once, as if confirming something internally, then stepped aside to allow space. That was when Monica reached into her jacket with deliberate calm. The motion was unhurried, precise, leaving no room for misinterpretation. She withdrew the badge that had remained hidden until now, holding it at chest level, angled so it caught the overhead light without dramatics. There was no name printed in bold letters, no decorative flourish, only markings recognized by those who understood their meaning. The effect was immediate. The official inhaled sharply and lowered his gaze in acknowledgement. A clerk nearby stopped mid-step. A judge at the far end of the hall turned fully around, his attention fixed on the badge as if drawn by instinct. Cross felt his throat tighten. He recognized the insignia not from training manuals, but from whispered briefings and rare emails marked for limited distribution. It was not law enforcement. It was oversight, authority that did not patrol hallways or issue commands, but evaluated, audited, and held systems to account. Monica lowered the badge just enough to signal that its display was informational, not performative. She did not explain its significance. She did not need to. The official spoke instead, confirming her role in a neutral tone that carried unmistakable weight, stating that Monica Hale supervised judicial compliance on that floor and beyond. The words settled over the corridor like a recalibration. Cross took a step back without realizing he had moved. His earlier certainty drained away, replaced by the awareness that every word he had spoken, every assumption he had made, now existed within a very different context. Monica addressed him directly for the first time, thanking him for his diligence and his patience. There was no sarcasm in her voice, no rebuke. She simply acknowledged the process as it had unfolded. Cross nodded, his response automatic, his posture now unmistakably deferential. Around them, the courthouse resumed movement, but differently, more carefully. Doors opened with quiet urgency. Phones were lifted and set down again. The system adjusted in real time, responding not to confrontation, but to clarity. Monica replaced the badge inside her jacket and straightened it, the moment of revelation complete. She did not linger. She did not wait for apologies or explanations. She moved forward, and this time, no one blocked her path. As she walked down the corridor, those she passed offered subtle signs of recognition, a nod, a pause, a shift in stance. Cross remained where he was, watching her go, aware that the floor he believed he controlled had never truly been his to command. In the quiet aftermath, the courthouse carried on, its polished surfaces unchanged, its routines intact. But something fundamental had been exposed, not through force or spectacle, but through the simple act of standing still until the truth could no longer be ignored. The corridor settled into a new rhythm after Monica Hale disappeared behind a set of secured doors, one that felt quieter not because activity had stopped, but because awareness had sharpened. Officer Daniel Cross remained near the checkpoint, his posture stiff, his thoughts replaying the encounter with uncomfortable clarity. He had not raised his voice. He had followed procedure, and yet procedure now felt like a fragile shield rather than a solid foundation. A supervisor approached him moments later, not hurried, not angry, simply attentive. The questions were calm, precise, focused on sequence rather than blame. Cross answered each one carefully, realizing with every sentence how permanent words could become once they were documented. Nearby, clerks returned to their desks, but their glances carried a new caution, an understanding that oversight was no longer an abstract concept discussed in training sessions. It was present. It was watching. Inside a conference room overlooking the same hallway, Monica took her seat at the head of a long table, greeted not with surprise, but with measured respect. Judges entered one by one, their expressions composed, their greetings formal. No one mentioned the incident directly, yet lingered unspoken, a reminder of how easily assumptions could surface when scrutiny was absent. Monica opened her folder, reviewing notes she had prepared long before that morning. Notes that outlined compliance standards, access protocols, and patterns of conduct observed across multiple jurisdictions. Her presence there was not punitive. It was corrective. Back in the hallway, Cross received a quiet directive assigning him to administrative duties for the remainder of the day, framed as routine, temporary, procedural. He accepted it without protest. As he walked away from the floor he had guarded so confidently, he felt the subtle shift in how others perceived him, not with hostility, but with distance. Authority, he realized, was not something granted permanently. It was something maintained through awareness and restraint. Throughout the building, conversations adjusted. A clerk paused before making a dismissive comment. A bailiff reconsidered how he addressed a visitor. Small changes, barely noticeable, began to ripple outward. This was not spectacle. There were no raised voices, no dramatic confrontations. There was only recalibration. In the conference room, Monica listened more than she spoke, asking questions that required reflection rather than defense. When she did speak, her words were precise, focused on systems rather than individuals. Accountability, she reminded them, was not about punishment. It was about alignment. The meeting concluded without fanfare. Schedules were updated. Reviews were scheduled. Expectations were clarified. As Monica left the room, she passed the same hallway once more, now unobstructed, now attentive in a different way. Those she encountered offered professional nods, careful and respectful. She acknowledged them briefly, her demeanor unchanged. Outside the building, the city moved on, unaware of the quiet adjustments that had taken place within its walls. To most, it was just another day at the courthouse. To those inside, it was a reminder that power observed itself differently when it knew it could be observed in return. Officer Cross exited through a side door, the afternoon light feeling harsher than usual. He paused for a moment, reflecting not on humiliation, but on understanding. He had believed himself a gatekeeper. That belief had gone unchallenged for years. Now, it had been corrected, not through force, but through presence. Inside, Monica continued her work, unseen by the public, unnoticed by those who did not know what to look for. That was how oversight functioned best, not loudly, not visibly, but effectively. The courthouse remained standing, its marble floors polished, its routines intact. Yet beneath the surface, something essential had shifted, A quiet lesson absorbed by a system reminded that authority without awareness was always temporary, and that dignity, when met with patience and truth, had a way of reshaping even the most rigid structures. The courthouse returned to its familiar cadence by the time afternoon light filtered through the tall windows, casting long reflections across the marble floors. For most who passed through, the day blended into memory like any other, a sequence of filings, hearings, and quiet routines. Yet beneath that surface normalcy, a subtle awareness lingered, an understanding that the systems governing those halls were not as distant or untouchable as they once seemed. Officer Daniel Cross completed his reassignment without incident, his movements deliberate, his tone measured. He spoke less than usual, listening more, noticing details he had previously dismissed as irrelevant. Each interaction carried new weight, not because he feared consequence, but because he recognized responsibility in a way he had not before. The realization settled slowly, uncomfortable yet clarifying. Authority, he understood now, was not about control over space or people. It was about judgment exercised with awareness, something he had taken for granted until it was reflected back at him without anger or spectacle. In an office overlooking the city, Monica Hale concluded her work for the day with the same quiet efficiency that had marked her arrival. Reports were finalized, notes secured, follow-ups scheduled for weeks ahead. The outcomes were not dramatic, not headline-worthy, and that was precisely the point. Change that lasted rarely announced itself loudly. It took shape in recalibrated expectations, in moments of hesitation where certainty once rushed unchecked. As Monica prepared to leave, she paused briefly at the doorway, looking back at the building that had revealed so much without ever raising its voice. She felt no triumph, only resolve. The purpose of her role had never been to embarrass or punish. It was to ensure that dignity was not conditional, that fairness did not depend on appearance or assumption. Outside, the city moved with its usual rhythm, unaware of the quiet lessons absorbed within the courthouse walls. Commuters crossed streets, conversations drifted from cafes, and life continued uninterrupted. Yet for those who had witnessed the subtle shift that morning, something fundamental had been clarified. Power, when left unexamined, tended to harden into habit. But when met with patience and truth, it softened into accountability. Cross exited the building later that evening, pausing briefly at the steps. He looked back once, not with resentment, but with contemplation. The badge on his chest still represented duty, but now it carried a different meaning. It reminded him that every decision, no matter how routine it felt, shaped the space around it. Inside, clerks locked offices, judges gathered their belongings, and the courthouse lights dimmed one by one. The structure remained unchanged, its stone, facade steady against the fading sky. Yet the atmosphere within had shifted, not through force or confrontation, but through the quiet presence of someone who refused to be rushed, dismissed, or defined by assumption. Monica walked away from the building without looking back, her role complete for now. She did not need acknowledgement or recognition. The work spoke for itself in the subtle adjustments it inspired. In the end, no one had raised their voice, no one had demanded obedience. The lesson had arrived without warning and without drama, carried by the simple truth that authority was never absolute, only accountable. And in that realization, justice did not roar. It resonated, steady and enduring, reminding everyone who crossed those halls that dignity, once recognized, had the power to reshape even the most rigid systems.